All right, I have a lot to say and not a lot of time to say it. So put on your tinfoil hats and let's get started. We all like to think that our opinions are our own and that the decisions we make are based solely through our own intuition. After this speech, you might not think that as strongly. You probably heard in the news that Elon Musk just bought Twitter. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, Elon now has unchecked power and fully controls the distribution of all information on Twitter, and he can promote whatever suits his interests. What if I were to tell you that he is not the first person to do this, and in fact, there are powerful powers that have been doing this for years? You might think that this sounds crazy, but I'm about to reveal to you some unsettling truths that make you question your sources. Today, I'll be speaking about the massive asset management companies that own major portions of every business and news organization in America. And I'm going to try and convince you of the extent of their power and how they are a literal example of what people think of when they think of the Illuminati. All right, I've got a rhetorical question for the audience. How many of these logos here do you recognize? You might recognize these three on the left. What about these other three nondescript titles on the right? These big titles are known as the big three asset management companies. But for the sake of time, I'll mainly be focusing on one in particular, BlackRock. All right, so who is Larry Fink and what is BlackRock? That's Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, an asset management firm that owns a majority share of every major American company. Look at the way his eyes are staring at you. Those are the eyes of a man who knows that he's powerful than most nations. You will get very familiar with his face in this speech. Here's a couple other photos of Larry. So what is BlackRock and what do they own? BlackRock owns 10% of almost every major news company in the United States. Over $9.5 trillion in assets under management. For context, that's 9.5 million millions. They own news organizations, oil companies, and farming companies like Monsanto, and a lot more. Here's a couple news companies that they own. They own 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 12% of CNN, 12% of Disney, who themselves own multiple media platforms, 13% of Comcast, 8.3% of New York Times, 6.5% of Facebook, 14% of Gannett newspapers like USA Today and 250 other daily newspapers, and 10% of Sinclair, which owns 70% of US households' local TV stations. As you can see, Larry's playing both sides, owning both Republican and Democrat-based news stations, as well as social media platforms. Although BlackRock doesn't entirely own these companies, they have a majority shareholder, meaning that they have large seat in the decision-making table of these companies. This is just a very short list of the top news organizations that BlackRock has ownership of. They have their hands in the pockets of every other news network and social media platform in America. Owning this many news stations can lead to some hilariously ironic mistakes, though. Like, check this out.
Headley. And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We're extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS4 News produces.
But we are concerned about
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extreme.
Anyway,
Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility.
it goes on like that for a while. If you don't think that's scary, I don't know what will scare you. At this point, you might be starting to understand why I've been comparing this company to the Illuminati. The rabbit hole goes even deeper. BlackRock has more power than they report. Remember those two other companies I mentioned at the beginning, Vanguard and State Street? Well, I won't get into too much detail, but they have been using the same global domination strategy as BlackRock. These two companies combined manage over $11 trillion in assets. And can you guess who owns a majority share of both these companies? That's right, our favorite shadow organization, the Illuminati. I mean BlackRock. This means that BlackRock's theoretical ownership of corporate America is double what they're reporting, and they're already reporting an insane amount. This leads us to a very important question. How has BlackRock been using its power? Maybe they're not so bad. They claim to be a for the people company, meaning that their ultimate goal is to make the world around them a better place. That being said, this doesn't mean much because every dictator in history has thought the same thing about their agenda. On the BlackRock website, it says that in 2020, BlackRock reached carbon neutrality in its operations. That might be true, but that statistic is extremely manipulative. Buying green companies as a carbon offset allows them to say that they're going carbon neutral while they still own large shares in large carbon emitting organizations like oil plants and coal mines. His forward-thinking agenda may just be a way for Larry to manipulate this generation into supporting him and making his company more money. So what are your thoughts on BlackRock? If I did my job right, you're now aware of the intangible amount of power BlackRock holds. On top of that, you're probably thinking that the amount of censorship and media influence they have makes them seem like the Illuminati. Don't get too discouraged though. CEO Larry Fink has stated many times that he's attempting to push the world towards a greener future. So although our every thought is monitored and controlled by corporations such as this, at least they have a morally good agenda, I guess. Hopefully the statistics, examples, and analogy I use speak for themselves, and you now understand how Larry Fink has a role in every decision you make. I don't think it's possible to stop him at this point. BlackRock is so deeply rooted into the United States economy that removing him now would likely destroy the United States as a whole. I would like to state, though, that in my research, it was extremely difficult to find any credible sources that anything bad to say about Larry Fink or BlackRock. He's either the perfect human being without any flaws, or he's using his position to censor any ill will against him. To end this speech, I'd like to leave you with 3 ideas. 1, do your own research. 2, don't blindly follow what the media tells you. And 3, I'm not crazy, you're crazy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, stop recording.